Hello and welcome. This is Roger Royse with Silicon Valley Impact on TALRadio. Welcome back. Every week or so, we bring you a story about somebody here in Silicon Valley that's changing the world for the better. And today, we are really excited to be able to talk to Christine Moseley. She's the founder of a company named Full Harvest, which attacks the problem of food waste at the farm level using technology. So Christine has got a really interesting background. She's a serial entrepreneur. When she was only 17, she started a music education nonprofit called Musical Empowerment, which is still around today and growing nationally. And that's many years later. But over the past 15 years or so, Christine has been involved in logistics and food industries at Fortune 100 companies, as well as startups. In fact, has been named by Fortune as the #2 most innovative woman in food and drink, and the Forbes list #14 in women crushing tech. And Full Harvest itself is one of Forbes' most innovative ag tech startups. So, Christine, I want to thank you very much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
So I'm not sure where to begin, but before we jump into Full Harvest, it's really kind of interesting what you did in, I guess it would have been in high school, with this music education, musical empowerment. What was that about? Can you tell us a little?
Sure. So both my parents were entrepreneurs, and my mom has run her own business for over 30 years. So as a woman, that was always my role model. And I think that plus having it in my blood somehow, I have always been very entrepreneurial, looking for big problems to solve. And funny enough, my senior year of high school, we were required to find a science experiment to work on for the science fair. And I had been a piano player, very competitive throughout my life, and was at the top of my class, and realized that a lot of the other kids that were at the top of my class were also competitive musicians, and wanted to understand if there was a tie between music and either their success within school and or their discipline and eventual life outcome. And so wanted to experiment on that. They weren't allowing me to do it because of human subjects, but my dad at the time was president of the Boys and Girls Club and said, if you have, Christine, you have all this extra piano music sitting around, you have a bunch of keyboards you've won that you don't use, why don't you just go and volunteer and get some of your friends and see if it works to help some of these kids, with music after school. And sure enough, over a year or so, we saw kids that had natural, brilliant talent with music and were already performing better in their school by the end of the year, which was more qualitative. But they just never would have had access to individual one-on-one music lessons. So when I went to college, I actually replicated it. And now actually in 2 weeks, I'm flying to North Carolina to celebrate the 20-year anniversary of what's now a national nonprofit connecting college students, one-on-one mentors with underserved children that can't afford individual music lessons. And it's almost grown even more outside of teaching them a skill. It's turned into almost like a big brother, big sister program where you actually learn something that helps you in life and in school, because the relationships that are forged has been huge for the kids to have somebody to look up to that went to college and then incent them to want to go to college. So it's been really, really great to experience.
Yeah. And did you start this in North Carolina? Is that where you're from?
I'm originally from Florida. So I started it my senior year of high school in Florida, but then the actual official national nonprofit that I replicated, that's what's still going on 20 years later, was at college in North Carolina. So we're at 7-8 universities on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And expanding. So, yeah.
I see. Well, Florida makes a lot of sense. It's a big agricultural state.
Yeah. I grew up playing in the Tropicana orange grove fields. So Tropicana is in my hometown of Bradenton, Florida. So that's how, I grew up, was out in the orange groves playing hide and seek.
So you grew up with on the production end, seeing how food is produced and maybe packed and shipped, and so it must have had a big influence on you. Just you were young, right?
Definitely. It was the industry, one of the big industries in my hometown.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a lot more about that. And we're going to talk, first of all, it's fascinating what you did with musical empowerment and some of your other nonprofit initiatives.
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about Full Harvest and what you're doing now, your upbringing in Florida and how that might have informed what looks like your life's mission now, which is the food waste problem. I personally I grew up in the Midwest. My parents were in the produce business, and I'll never forget how much waste there was. It was just incredible how much gets thrown away. And I think even today in that industry, we're still using kind of old-fashioned refrigeration. I know there's new technologies that are a little better, but it was just quite shocking. Do you know what is the food waste statistics here in the U.S. these days for produce? Do you know?
Yes, there's a Santa Clara University report, as well as a recent report called Driven to Waste that the World Wildlife Fund and Tesco did. So the Santa Clara report spent 3 years studying 20 commodities, longitudinal study in the field with some of the largest growers, and found that 25% of edible produce in the US on average does not leave the farm level. In that average are some outliers like romaine. 65% of all romaine in the US on average is wasted on the field that's edible, not even inedible. So more is wasted with romaine because of romaine hearts than is actually consumed. And then the Driven to Waste report looked at the problem globally and confirmed that globally, 25% of our edible produce and food production does not even leave the farm level as well. So a quarter of our fresh edible food system is not being captured and utilized, which, as we're running out of land, water, and resources, will become a very urgent and necessary problem to solve, which is what we're trying to do at Full Harvest.
Yeah, and then the problem continues. I know even in shipment, there's waste, spoilage, damage, etc. So what's Full Harvest solution for this? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So, having firsthand experience, one growing up and seeing a lot of waste on citrus farms in Florida, and then working in supply chain and seeing a lot of waste, and then working for a CPG company, scaling one of the first green juice companies, I saw a lot of waste. And being an entrepreneur, always looking for my next big problem to solve, but wanting to find one for a huge market to make a big impact, and go after a big business opportunity. And so, really, what I found was that a food waste report came out, and what stood out to me was how big the food waste problem was overall, but the fact that they were saying, how much was wasted at the farm level, which a lot of people weren't talking about. So when I went out to one of the largest farms in the country to see firsthand what was going on, that was kind of the moment I realized what business I wanted to start and what it needed to be, where I watched as they only were capturing 25-30% of the romaine heads, as I just mentioned, for the romaine hearts, and letting everything else fall to the ground. And that extra outside leaves were perfectly beautiful, and I was having to step on them, and they would have been great for the green juices that we had just been making at my last company. And so what I realized is that it was happening due to consumers getting pickier and pickier and retailers getting larger and larger, and that demand trickling down to ag, but it wasn't being solved due to the way that the current industry is set up, but also due to a lack of incentive from farmers to sell this off-grade produce, because the process to purchase and sell is 96% offline and very painful and time consuming. And so the metaphor I give is, imagine if Airbnb tried to scale over the phone. That would be crazy and definitely would not be a business today. And that's really the way that farmers are trying to scale this excess inventory problem. Meanwhile, they're extremely strapped for time, money, resources, and it's a perishable product. So really the standard is to focus on the perfect looking produce, sell it to the retailers, which is one of their bigger markets, and let the rest of it either, be churned back into the ground, or if it's shed packed, taken to the dump where they usually have to pay. So my solution, similar to seeing Airbnb and other big companies that have disrupted other industries and helped make them more efficient with excess inventory, saw the huge opportunity to create a B2B marketplace connecting these farmers directly to these food and beverage companies that don't need to care what produce looks like, to really incent them by making it super easy within seconds, being able to press a few buttons and get more sales, and really finding the win-win-win where farmers desperate for incremental revenue would make incremental revenue. They previously were not. We would be reducing food waste at the farm level, huge climate change contributor. The number one, to be exact, is food waste.
Yeah.
And then helping food and beverage companies be more efficient, save time and money. So that's why we started Full Harvest as a B2B marketplace.
Yeah, awesome. That's brilliant. And and I've seen a lot of companies trying to establish marketplaces in agriculture and have problems because agriculture is a different industry, right? It's and I tell people that all the time. It's different. It's different than your tech industries. They've got their own little, kind of way of doing things, and it's hard to break in. Did you find it was hard to break into this market, or was it relatively easy for you?
I think to get off the ground, basically, people are incented by money. Usually there's a few incentives out there, but money is a big one. And so I prioritized shoring up the demand. And the way I shored up demand was leveraging my experience in the food and beverage industry through connections, through relating to them, to their experiences, and to have firsthand experience. So I think that was a competitive advantage in terms of me being able to build quick trust with the buyer side and demand side, and then bringing that net new business to some of these farmers direct versus, where it was previously going was through distributors or brokers. Bringing it direct to the farm was very valuable to the farm. And so I think that then helped us pretty easily work with some of our first farms. I think in general, we have to continually every day be focusing on how do we incent habit change and tech adoption with both sides, because even, early on or, with a certain number of customers, we are able to do that, but we're trying to get as fast as possible mass industry adoption onto the internet, essentially, to buy and sell. And I think that's the holy grail. The first to do that is going to be, a leader in a $1 trillion industry. And we have at least 5 years first mover advantage on that. And so we're just moving as fast as we can to really be the thought leaders in the space for digitization.
That's awesome. Christine, it's really interesting to see just how big AgTech's gotten. And I know you're one of the, early, I guess, participants in our Silicon Valley AgTech program many years ago. But boy, have things come a long way since then. And it's not just that, and I think it's a perfect storm because ag technologies are not just for agriculture and just for, enhancing production. They're also solving really big problems facing the world: sustainability, climate change, environmental. And I think maybe that's part of what's been driving this tremendous growth. What do you think about that as somebody who's on the inside looking out in an ag tech company?
Yeah, I think it's amazing to be kind of at the front lines, having seen this over the last 6 years, 7 years, where when I was pitching my business 7 years ago, it was, really difficult to get people that either were paying attention or understood what we were trying to do. And it's completely 180 from that now, where there's a lot of interest, a lot of money going into the space. The other big transformation I've seen, which is super exciting, is previously there was this term of clean tech, which was how they defined, startups within the sustainability space, but it was primarily energy companies because that was all that really was being focused on was clean energy. And only in the recent years did they even invite food and ag companies, let alone start showcasing them. And, I was blown away where, last year we won for NREL, the top late stage growth company, because to me, that was like a moment in time that finally clean tech was expanding and understanding that, food and ag is actually a massive part of the sustainability conversation. And based on Project Drawdown's research, 8 out of the top 20 solutions for climate change are within food and ag. So I think it's amazing to see that transformation. And I hope that it only gets more sped up, because there's still a lack of awareness in the general markets around that connection between food and ag and climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm from an agricultural state, as are you, and I hesitate saying anything bad about agriculture, but you got to admit that the carbon footprint is huge.
Yes.
And the environmental impact is huge, and we find technology solutions that can deal with those issues.
Right.
So I find agriculture generally, it wasn't like this 10 years ago, but now it's kind of embracing the technology solutions, because you either, innovate or die out here in Silicon Valley, right? And you definitely are one of the people on the leading edge of that movement. It's funny what you said about clean tech. I remember that too. I remember when clean tech was all the rage, then clean tech was a dirty word. Now it's climate tech or energy tech or yes.
Yeah. Now it's changed to climate tech, I think, because it had, clean tech had such a energy focus. And climate tech's more encompassing, I think.
So I guess the last question. So tell me, what's the future hold for Full Harvest? What are your plans for this company? I mean, I've seen you all over the press. I know you're doing big things and doing rounds. Can you tell us what's next?
Yeah, sure. So we just raised a big Series B earlier this year. We're really scaling our team, especially on the tech side. And every other week rolling out really exciting new stuff. Basically everything we're doing is innovation in some way, shape, or form, because it's trying to figure out how to automate and bring online all the different old school offline processes. So it makes it really interesting and fun. But now, we're at a point where by the end of this year, we will have finished automating pretty much every major piece of the purchase and sale process, no matter how nuanced and complex it was offline. And so next year is really about hugely scaling in terms of different markets and locations, as well as adding a lot of really exciting data and insights and premium features for our users, as well as being able to bring on their existing customer bases, because we don't want to just be a way for people to buy and sell product that they're looking for, that they were trying to sell. We'd like to ideally, really help them manage their business in a more efficient way through technology and transparency and data, because we're collecting data that literally no one else has, in terms of down to the, level of what buyers are looking for supply and what suppliers are looking for from buyers. And that transparency and data, especially with COVID having been a wake-up call for how, difficult it was with that lack of transparency when there were supply chain disruptions. This solves for that, where 24/7 in the palm of your hands, you can see what's going on with, availability or with demand. So just helping also farmers be more flexible, where if they maybe before were very heavily leaning on food service, this gives access to new markets for them on a dime if they need to sell product to new markets.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Christine, for being here with us today and chatting with us. This is Roger Royse, Silicon Valley Impact on TALRadio. We've just finished up speaking with Christine Moseley, the founder of Full Harvest, a company that is solving the problem of food waste at the farm level. Thanks again, Christine, for being here.
Thank you.
Those of you out in the audience, we'll see you next time.